Next June, basically, we'll start to see these plants come up. Won't really be until July that we'll have a real good idea, because there's a lot of plants really thin out after they first come up. They'll come up really thick and they'll just be everywhere, but they'll start to thin out and we'll see how they did. But yeah, next year we should have a pretty good idea of how the first reseeding went.
So did you guys seed like last fall then also?
We haven't actually seeded Spectacle in 5 or 6 years, I think.
Okay.
But Terry was kind of here at the beginning of seeding Spectacle in 91 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. And they reseeded every year pretty much for the first maybe 15 years.
Oh, okay.
Like anywhere from 100 to 500 pounds every year for the first 15 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ma, were you ever part of the other seeding?
I was part of some of it, yeah.
Okay.
Some of it in the back bay too, but
Yeah.
I hadn't done it in a while.
Yeah.
I didn't even know they were still doing it, to tell you the truth.
We haven't seeded out here for 5 or 6 years, I think,
Okay.
was the last time. But
So is this the best time to seed? Do you ever do spring seedings, or is it always in the fall? And
so it is possible to do spring seedings. Most people will seed in the fall, right? That's when that plant is normally dropping that seed, so it's the most sort of natural conditions. There's a way to seed in the spring, and we do that sort of in the back bay with our targeted, experimental exposures and stuff. Basically just sink these bags over winter, so it's still sort of mimicking the conditions that these seeds would have over a hard winter, but then you can pull them up and you can target that seeding in a very specific area.
And you're saying the ideal time to harvest is 1st of September, somewhere around in there. You said we were a week maybe out.
So it really depends on the water body. It could be anywhere from third week in August to into September. For some reason, there are water bodies that the plants just tend to go later. But yeah, around here it's pretty much last week of August. And these plants, they'll all mature at a little bit different time too, right? So if somebody came in one week and then the next week somebody else came in, it's very possible that they could both have it, right?
So
it's like blueberry picking, right? They're not all ripe at the same time.
Right, and you had mentioned earlier something about when will you know if the seeding kind of took up? When do you expect to see?
So next June we'll see these plants start to come up, right? They'll basically just come up and they'll lay flat on the water. So we'll be able to see if these plants are coming up or not. By July we'll have a really better idea of which ones are going to survive, right? They thin themselves out quite a bit during that floating leaf stage. So yeah, next year we'll already have a pretty good idea of how this seeding works.
And then when do you harvest, say we're seeding this, when would you, if they came up, when would you expect to harvest this seed? Is it a 2-year thing?
These plants could produce seed next year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, it's really no different, right? We're taking seed from Wisconsin, Minnesota, or whatever, but this seed is going to drop in the water, and whether it knows that it's still in Wisconsin or
Right.
if it knows that it's out here.
It's just a condition thing.
Right. So we'll see if this seed from Wisconsin or wherever these waters came from does well in this sort of system. Just 2 or 3 hanging on here. These are fantastic looking seeds.
And you were saying this is a good year and you weren't really sure why?
It was a great year. Yeah, plants all grew really tall. All the seed heads had really good, tons of seeds on them. No ghost hulls, right? Sometimes you'll get it where they're just not
Producing any?
Yeah, right. They're just empty shells. And the other big thing was often on Spectacle here, we have geese come through and depredate right when those plants pop up, so they don't come to flower, they don't seed out at all, anything like that. And we didn't have any of that this year. for whatever reason. So, yeah, great year. You know, drought years or high rain years, the water level in here is pretty much the same.
Yeah, because doesn't wild rice thrive in, what is it, is it best at a certain depth of water?
Yeah, I mean, if you stay under a meter, I've seen it grow in 6 inches of water. I've seen it grow in almost a meter.
And so most of these things that I'm seeing here are little patches of wild rice.
Everything coming up out of the water, yeah.
Okay. And then,
Except for the pickerel weed that you see around the edge.
And then the seed, it looks like most of the seed has fallen.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So what time does it?
We're probably 2 weeks after kind of the end of harvest, right? So generally out here we're looking at 3rd week of August, end of August.
Okay, so that's been, most of it's gone because of harvest or because of geese or just wind
dropping off
and
natural.
Okay.
Yep.
And I wonder what the success rate is for reseeding itself.
That's a good question. I mean, over the last 10 years, all these are sustaining at the level that they are straight through natural reseeding, right? Any seeds that dropped off the plant that took off, that's what we're seeing right here.
Okay.
There's not going to be much remnant from that seed.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how long is a plant, that plant comes up, how long, what's its lifespan typically in the wild? You know, it could be.
It's an annual plant, so.
It's an annual.
Yeah.
Okay, so it has to have, conditions have to be great.
But, seed can stay viable in the sediment if conditions aren't right for whatever reason. People have seen seed bounce back after 6-7 years, right? Conditions just finally get back to what they could be, and those seeds will.
And the shape of the seed naturally shaped, so once it drops, it's got that heavy end.
Torpedoes right down. Yep.
Sweet.
Yep.
Wild rice. It's. I mean, that talk about the base, the food chain for aquatic terrestrials, right? I mean, this is something that's,
The reason that brought the Ojibwe people to the area, right? Part of the migration story.
If you're going to talk about something that needs to be
Food that grows on water.
Public project focus. This is it. Now I wonder, in the Great Lakes, so your typical bays, Back Bay, Glacial Islands, maybe a little more difficult to get it to take hold.
A lot more impacts there, right?
Yeah.
A big windstorm, big seiche event, right? Seiche event in June when those plants are at floating leaf, that's just going to uproot all those plants and they're toast, right? So a lot more finicky on sort of Great Lakes connected wetlands.
Sure. You're going to get years of great growth but no consistency, and it's critical to protect those coastal wetlands so you don't have as much fluctuations.
Maybe we were just talking with Wanda about, like, you can read the schoolcraft papers, right? 1820, whatever, that he's coming through. And he talks about, in the straits, and he talks about sending his helper or assistant, right, across the rapids at the Sioux onto the other shoreline to get wild rice to take with him. We know that it was in the St. Mary's River. We know that it was in the area, not only from those written papers, but through oral history, right? So,
you would think any
trying
area,
our best to try and reintroduce it.
any area, slack water, boom.
Yeah.
Wild rice is going to take hold.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, it's good. Great project. Now with this partnership with NRCS, so is what we're doing today, would it be the end of it?
We were just talking, Madeline and I were just talking, we'll have to rewrite that to make it more obvious that it needs to be a multi-year reseeding. Right now it's set up basically that since we were only able to get half as much rice as we needed, it was kind of, we were going to have to do a second year anyways, just to kind of cover what we weren't able to get. But really, they suggest, you know, seeding 3 years over
3 years over.
to sustain a bed. Right, you know, we could probably get away with a year or two, just because there's already an established bed here. We're not starting from scratch. There should be some seed bank already there. And what we're trying to do here is just to expand and get those beds a little bit bigger, more robust, more able to hold up to some goose predation.
So like besides NRCS funding, if you looked at other nonprofit organization funding, so what would a let's say a nonprofit organization wanted to contribute to a seeding event of the scale that we did today?
So,
I mean, is that something we all right to talk about what that would cost?
I think the biggest thing that we can have for a seeding event like this today is community participation, right? Community members that we've seen out here today, that's awesome, man. Like,
yeah, you're right.
It doesn't cost a lot,
We
right?
were-
Especially for something that's on reservation. It costs nothing. It
Okay,
costs our time.
okay, 'cause
So I was just wondering, for this seeding that we are doing here in Spectacle Lake, why is this culturally, I guess historically significant for the community?
Well, for us here at Bay Mills, we follow the traditions of our ancestors, and among those traditions is feasting. And one of the most important foods of our feasting is wild rice. And it's really important for not only the community, but the community members that follow different traditions that we have. Sometimes when we have sweat lodges, those wild rice soup is used. Sometimes when we have seasonal feast, we use wild rice as part of that offering and part of our prayer. So it's important for us to get out here and put fresh seed into the lake and look forward to harvesting some in the coming years.